That door had been locked for 20 years, and nobody knew who had the key. Olivia Carter stood alone in the lower corridor of Blackwood Estate, one hand resting near an old brass lock that had never appeared on any household map. The mansion was quiet that evening, its polished floors reflecting the soft amber light from the wall lamps. For years, Olivia had moved through these halls almost unnoticed, completing her work with patience and dignity while the people around her rarely stopped to ask what she noticed. But Olivia noticed everything. A misplaced key, a door opened at the wrong hour, a conversation that suddenly stopped when she entered a room. Tonight, it was the lock that caught her attention. There were faint marks around the keyhole, fresh enough to suggest that someone had used it recently. She looked down the empty corridor. Nothing moved. No footsteps approached. No voices came from the rooms above. Olivia slowly tried the handle. To her surprise, it turned. The heavy door opened only a few inches before she paused. A cool draft moved through the narrow opening, carrying the faint smell of old paper and wood. She pushed the door farther and stepped inside. The room beyond was unlike anything else in the estate. Dust covered most of the shelves, but the objects on the central desk looked carefully preserved. Old envelopes, leather folders, framed photographs, a small silver box. Olivia took one cautious step forward. Then she saw the photograph. She reached toward it, but stopped before touching the frame. The image showed a woman standing beside a young boy in front of the same estate decades earlier. Olivia recognized the woman immediately. It was Adrian's mother. The boy was Adrian himself. But there was someone else in the photograph, a man standing several feet behind them. Olivia stared at the face, trying to understand why it felt familiar. Then she heard footsteps in the corridor. She turned. Adrian Blackwood stood in the doorway. At 43, the white mafia boss carried the controlled presence of a man accustomed to having answers. He was 188 centimeters tall, broad-shouldered and muscular, with light olive skin, a square jaw, brown eyes, dark brown slicked-back hair marked by natural gray, and a short boxed beard with subtle silver strands. His tailored black suit and open black shirt revealed part of the fixed black and gray tattoos across his neck and upper chest. His expression was normally calm, confident, and powerful. But when his eyes moved past Olivia and landed on the photograph, something changed. He stopped completely. Olivia stepped away from the desk. "I did not know this room existed," she said quietly. Adrian did not answer at first. He walked inside, slowly, his attention fixed on the photograph. The silence between them felt heavier than the old walls around them. Finally, Adrian looked at Olivia. "Neither did I." He picked up the photograph without disturbing anything else and studied the man standing behind his younger self. His face remained controlled, but his eyes had lost their certainty. That man was not a stranger. Adrian knew him. Victor Hale, the advisor who had served his family for years. The man Adrian had trusted with some of his most private affairs. Adrian lowered the photograph. For the first time, he looked around the room not as the owner of the estate, but as someone who had discovered a part of his own life that had been deliberately hidden. Olivia watched him carefully. She had opened a door, but neither of them yet understood how much of Adrian's past had been waiting behind it. Adrian closed the hidden door behind them, but he did not lock it again. He stood beneath the dim hallway light, holding the old photograph in one hand while Olivia remained a few steps away, waiting patiently. For several seconds, neither spoke. Adrian looked at the picture again. The woman beside the young boy was unmistakably his mother, Elena Blackwood. The boy was him, and behind them stood Victor Hale, much younger than Adrian remembered seeing him in the family records. "Victor told me he met my mother after I was already grown," Adrian said. His voice was quiet, almost thoughtful. Olivia looked toward the closed door. "Then the photograph tells a different story." Adrian nodded. He had spent most of his life believing that he understood his family history. He knew where his mother had lived, where she had worked, and which people had been trusted with the family estate. But the photograph had placed Victor inside a chapter that Adrian had never been told about. Adrian returned to the hidden room with Olivia. This time, he examined everything differently. The central desk held several leather folders arranged beneath a thin layer of dust. Some were labeled with dates. Others had no markings at all. Olivia pointed toward one envelope. "That one looks newer." Adrian carefully opened it. Inside was a handwritten note from his mother. The paper was yellowed, but the ink remained clear. She had written only a few lines, warning someone named Eleanor that certain records needed to remain hidden until Adrian was old enough to understand them. Adrian read the note twice. "Who is Eleanor?" Olivia asked. Adrian looked toward the shelves. "My mother's closest friend. I was told she left the family years ago." Olivia studied the envelope. "Then why would your mother write to her about these records?" Adrian had no answer. He placed the note beside the photograph and opened another folder. Inside were copies of property records, household inventories, and financial statements. Nothing appeared unusual at first. Then Olivia noticed something that Adrian had overlooked. 3 documents carried the same date, but the signatures were not identical. She pointed carefully. These were approved by different people. Adrian leaned closer. The first signature belonged to his mother. The second belonged to a former family attorney. The third appeared to belong to Victor. Why would Victor sign this? Olivia asked. Adrian remained silent. The document concerned temporary authority over several family assets. The authority was supposed to last only 6 months. Yet another page showed the same arrangement extended again and again. Adrian's expression tightened. "I was never told about this." Olivia looked at him. "Maybe you were not supposed to know." The words settled into the room. Adrian turned toward the shelves and noticed a narrow gap between 2 folders. Inside was a small brass key. He lifted it carefully. A number had been engraved on its surface. 12. Olivia glanced toward the silver box on the desk. Adrian understood immediately. He placed the key beside the box without opening it. "We do not touch anything else until we know what we are looking at," he said. Olivia nodded. For the first time, Adrian was not treating her as an employee following instructions. He was listening to her observations as if they mattered. Outside the room, a clock sounded 11 times. Then came the faint echo of footsteps somewhere above them. Adrian looked toward the ceiling. Someone else was awake. He closed the folder and carried the photograph with him. As they stepped back into the corridor, Olivia noticed something unusual. The hidden door had not been fully closed. A thin line of warm light remained visible beneath it. She looked at Adrian. He looked back at the door. Neither had left it open. Someone had been there while they were inside. Adrian's calm expression returned, but his eyes had changed. The room was no longer simply a forgotten part of his family's past. Someone still cared enough about its secrets to come looking. And now Adrian knew one thing for certain. They were not the only people who knew the door existed. By sunrise, Adrian had already made one decision. He would not confront Victor until he understood what the documents meant. The hidden room remained untouched, its door secured under Adrian's personal instructions, while the photograph and the first set of records rested inside his private study. Olivia stood near the window as Adrian spread the documents across the large wooden desk. Morning light crossed the pages, revealing dates, signatures, and handwritten notes that had remained hidden for years. Adrian studied the property records again. The temporary authority granted to Victor had been extended 3 times. Each extension carried a different date, yet every document seemed to lead back to the same small group of people. His mother, the former family attorney, Victor Hale. "There is something wrong with the timing," Adrian said. Olivia moved closer, careful not to disturb the papers. "What do you mean?" Adrian pointed to the first agreement. "This one says 6 months. The next one extends it for another 6. Then another. But the final extension was signed after my mother was already too ill to manage the estate herself." Olivia looked at the signature. "Are you certain she signed it?" Adrian paused. "I thought I was." He reached for an old letter from his mother's private collection, one he had kept for years without examining the handwriting closely. He placed it beside the trust document. The difference was subtle, but once Olivia saw it, she could not unsee it. The letters were shaped differently. The spacing was different. Even the final stroke of the signature carried a different rhythm. Adrian stared at both pages. "That is not her signature." The room became quiet. He had expected secrets, but not this. Olivia looked toward the photograph from the hidden room. "Then someone wanted you to believe she approved those extensions." Adrian nodded slowly. He began searching through another folder. Inside were copies of household reports from the same period. One entry mentioned a private meeting between Victor and Adrian's mother at the country property. Another referred to a sealed package delivered to Eleanor Brooks. Adrian stopped reading. Eleanor again. Olivia looked at the note from the previous night. "Your mother trusted her with something." Adrian opened a drawer and removed an old family address book. Eleanor's name appeared beside an address in a small town less than 50 miles from the estate. He stared at it for several seconds. She is still alive. Olivia looked surprised. You never tried to find her? Adrian shook his head. I was told she wanted nothing more to do with the family. That sentence sounded different now. It no longer felt like a fact. It sounded like an explanation someone had given him because they wanted the questions to stop. Adrian picked up the photograph again. Victor stood behind his younger self, close enough to appear part of the family circle. The image suddenly carried a different meaning. Victor had not simply served Adrian's family. He had been present during a period Adrian barely remembered. We need to know when he entered our lives, Adrian said. Olivia nodded. Before they could leave, Adrian's security manager entered the study with a report from the previous night. Someone had accessed the basement corridor at 11:07 p.m. The security camera showed Victor walking toward the hidden door. He had remained there for less than 4 minutes. Adrian's expression stayed calm. He asked for the recording. On the screen, Victor approached the door without hesitation. He did not search for the entrance. He did not look confused. He simply unlocked it and entered. Olivia watched silently. Adrian replayed the footage. Victor emerged carrying nothing. But before leaving, he turned toward the camera for one brief moment. He looked directly into the lens. Adrian stopped the recording. The room fell silent. Victor had known the camera was there, and he had known exactly when Adrian would see the footage. Adrian looked at Olivia. He wanted us to know he was there. Olivia considered the thought, or he wanted us to think that. Adrian closed the folder. For the first time, the mystery was no longer only about what had been hidden. It was about who was controlling what they discovered next. The most dangerous thing Adrian discovered that morning was not the hidden room. It was the possibility that someone had been waiting for him to find it. After reviewing the security footage, Adrian ordered the basement corridor secured and moved every original document into his private study. He did not accuse Victor. Not yet. Instead, he wanted to know why Victor had entered the room at 11:07 the previous night and why he had looked directly toward the security camera before leaving. Olivia stood across the study while Adrian replayed the recording. Once, twice, 3 times. Victor never appeared confused. He walked through the corridor as though he had memorized every step. He opened the hidden door without hesitation. Then, before leaving, he turned toward the camera. He knew we would see this, Olivia said. Adrian looked at her. That is what concerns me. He paused the recording and returned to the documents. The first trust agreement remained open on the desk. 6 months of temporary authority. Then another extension. Then another. Adrian searched the estate records for the exact date of each signature. The pattern was almost perfect, except for one detail. The final extension had been approved during a period when his mother was officially unable to manage financial affairs. Adrian reached for another document and compared the signature again. The difference was small. The pressure of the pen was wrong. The final letter curved differently. The spacing between the initials did not match. Olivia leaned closer. It looks similar, but it does not look natural. Adrian nodded. Someone wanted it to look real. He opened the family archive database and searched for Victor Hale. The first record showed Victor joining the estate administration 20 years ago. Adrian stopped. 20 years. He checked the photograph again. Victor was already there. The dates did not fit the story Adrian had been told. He searched older household records. Victor's name appeared again, this time beside a private meeting involving Adrian's mother and Eleanor Brooks. Then another record appeared. A sealed package had been transferred to Eleanor 2 days before Adrian's mother left the country property. Adrian stared at the entry. My mother was not supposed to leave that week, he said. Olivia looked at him. Then why did she? Adrian had no answer. He opened a drawer and found an old calendar belonging to his mother. Several dates had been marked in dark ink. One was the same day the package was delivered. Another was the day Victor's temporary authority was extended. The third contained only 2 words. Meet Eleanor. Adrian slowly closed the calendar. The mystery had changed shape. This was no longer simply about a hidden room or missing records. His mother had been preparing for something. Someone had interrupted that plan. Before Adrian could continue, the study door opened. Victor Hale stood outside, composed and impeccably dressed. He looked toward Adrian, then toward Olivia, and finally toward the papers on the desk. His expression remained polite. I heard there was activity in the basement last night, Victor said. Adrian leaned back in his chair. There was. Victor gave a small nod. I hope nothing important was disturbed. The sentence sounded ordinary, but Adrian heard the warning beneath it. He picked up the photograph and placed it face down. Why were you in the basement? Victor's eyes moved briefly toward Olivia before returning to Adrian. I was checking an old storage area. You knew where the door was. Victor paused, only for a second, but Olivia noticed. Adrian noticed too. Of course, Victor replied. I have worked for this family for a long time. Adrian smiled faintly. How long? Victor did not answer immediately. The room became still. Then Adrian slid the old photograph across the desk. Victor looked at it. His expression changed. It was almost nothing, just a slight tightening around the eyes. But it was enough. Adrian had his first real answer. Victor knew the photograph, and he had been hoping Adrian would never find it. The photograph changed everything because Victor's reaction had answered a question Adrian had not yet asked. After Victor left the study, Adrian remained seated, staring at the closed door, while Olivia stood quietly beside the desk. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, Adrian turned the photograph over and examined the date written on the back. It was 21 years old. He looked toward Olivia. Victor told me he joined the family after this. Olivia studied the photograph again. Then someone changed the story. Adrian opened his mother's old calendar and placed it beside the photograph. The marked date from 21 years ago matched the date on the picture. Beneath it, his mother had written 3 words. Move the records. Adrian felt a quiet certainty settle over him. The hidden room had not been abandoned. It had been prepared. Someone had moved the records there because they expected them to become important later. He opened the silver box with the small brass key they had found the night before. Inside was a folded document wrapped in thin protective paper. The heading immediately caught his attention. It was a trust agreement connected to the Blackwood family estate. Adrian read the first page slowly. His mother had transferred temporary authority over several properties and financial accounts to Victor Hale. But the agreement clearly stated that the arrangement would expire after 6 months. Adrian turned to the next page. The same authority had been extended. Then again. Each extension carried a signature that appeared to belong to his mother. Olivia noticed something on the final page. The date. Adrian looked closer. The last extension had been signed during a period when his mother had been recorded as unable to manage family affairs. He compared the signature with a letter written by her only weeks earlier. The difference was subtle, but unmistakable. It is not hers, he said. Olivia remained silent. Adrian placed both documents side by side. The evidence was no longer a suspicion. Someone had created the appearance that his mother continued approving the extensions. Adrian searched the silver box again. Beneath the trust documents was a small envelope addressed to Eleanor Brooks. Inside was a handwritten note from his mother. It was short, but the meaning was clear. She had discovered irregularities in the trust and believed someone inside the family administration was using her illness to maintain control. She intended to meet Eleanor privately and recover the original records. Adrian read the note twice. Then he looked at the photograph. Victor had been there all along. Why would my mother hide this from me, he asked. Olivia answered carefully. Maybe she was trying to protect you until you were old enough to understand it. Adrian looked down at the note. For the first time, he considered that his mother's silence might not have been abandonment. It might have been protection. He turned to the final page of the agreement. A handwritten notation appeared in the margin. Original documents moved to the second property. Adrian froze. Second property? Olivia nodded toward the family address book. Your country house. Adrian remembered it immediately. The property had supposedly been sold years ago, yet the address still appeared in several old records. He called the estate administrator and requested the current ownership documents. Minutes later, the answer arrived. The property had not been sold. It had been transferred into a private trust under a different legal name. Adrian slowly leaned back. Another secret. Another contradiction. Another door. He looked at Olivia, and for the first time there was something different in his expression. Not suspicion. Respect. She had been the first person to notice the hidden door, the unusual lock, the photograph, and the details everyone else had ignored. We are going there, Adrian said. Outside the study, footsteps passed through the hallway. Neither of them noticed the figure who stopped briefly near the door, listening in silence before continuing down the corridor. The truth had been hidden for 20 years. Now it was beginning to move. The country house stood nearly 40 miles from Blackwood Estate, hidden beyond a long private road lined with bare winter trees. By the time Adrian and Olivia arrived, the afternoon light had begun to fade, leaving the old property surrounded by a quiet gray sky. Adrian remained behind the wheel for a moment, studying the house through the windshield. He had not returned since childhood. He remembered the wide stone steps, the tall windows, and his mother's habit of standing near the front door whenever he arrived. But the memory felt incomplete now. Olivia looked toward the house. This was the second property? Adrian nodded. According to the documents, yes. They entered through the front door, which opened without resistance. The interior smelled of old wood and dust. Furniture remained covered with pale sheets, and framed family photographs lined the hallway. Adrian walked slowly, recognizing small details that triggered memories he had not thought about in years. A staircase, a brass lamp, a portrait of his mother. Then he stopped. Beneath the portrait was a narrow wooden cabinet. Its doors were slightly open. Olivia noticed immediately. Someone has been here. Adrian approached the cabinet and examined the dust. There were fresh marks along the lower shelf. Inside, they found several empty folders and one sealed envelope. The envelope carried Adrian's mother's handwriting. He opened it carefully. The letter inside was addressed to Eleanor Brooks. His mother's words revealed that she had become increasingly concerned about the family trust. She believed the temporary authority given to Victor had been extended without proper approval. She also believed that important records had been removed from the main estate. The final paragraph contained a sentence that made Adrian stop reading. If anything happens before I can explain, do not trust the version of events they give Adrian. Olivia watched his expression change. They, she asked. Adrian looked at the letter again. She did not name one person. He turned the page over. Nothing else was written there. Then Olivia noticed a faint indentation beneath the paper, as though another sheet had once been attached. She carefully held the page beneath the light. A few handwritten words became visible from the pressure left behind. Eleanor knows where the original records are. Adrian looked toward the hallway. Then we need Eleanor. Before they could leave, a sound came from the upstairs floor. It was not loud, but it was unmistakable. A door had closed somewhere above them. Adrian and Olivia looked at each other. Adrian did not rush. He simply motioned toward the staircase. They walked upstairs together and found a bedroom at the end of the hall. The door stood open. Inside, everything appeared untouched except for one desk near the window. A drawer had been pulled out. On the desk lay a small blue key tag. Olivia recognized it immediately. That is the same kind of tag from the basement. Adrian picked it up and turned it over. 3 words had been written on the back. Ask about Eleanor. Adrian stared at the message. Someone had left it intentionally. He placed the tag beside the letter. The mystery was no longer pointing toward a forgotten room. It was pointing toward a person who had known the truth before either of them understood what they were looking for. Adrian called Eleanor's number from the old address book. The phone rang several times before a woman's voice finally answered. Adrian introduced himself. There was a long silence. Then Eleanor said, I have been waiting for you to call for 20 years. Adrian looked at Olivia. The sentence changed everything. Eleanor had not been unaware of the past. She had been waiting for the moment when Adrian would finally discover it. Your mother was not protecting the family from Victor, Adrian. She was protecting you from the truth. Eleanor's voice was quiet, but the sentence seemed to remain in the room long after she finished speaking. Adrian sat across from her in the small living room of her home, the old letter from his mother resting between them. Olivia sat nearby, listening without interrupting. Eleanor Brooks was older than Adrian remembered, with silver hair, careful eyes, and the composed sadness of someone who had carried a secret for too many years. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, the room smelled of coffee, old books, and cedar furniture. Adrian leaned forward. Tell me everything. Eleanor looked at him for a long moment. Your mother knew the trust was being manipulated. She discovered that temporary authority had been extended without her full approval. She also discovered that records were being removed from the main estate. Adrian's jaw tightened. By Victor? Eleanor nodded slowly. She suspected him, but suspicion was not enough. She needed proof. Olivia glanced at the letter on the table. That is why she created the hidden archive. Eleanor looked at her and gave a faint nod. Yes, She knew people rarely questioned a maid carrying boxes, cleaning rooms, or moving through the house. You were invisible to them. Olivia remained silent. Adrian looked at her differently now. For years, he had seen the household staff as part of the machinery of his estate, necessary but distant. Olivia had been the exception without ever asking to be. She had noticed the lock. She had noticed the dust. She had noticed the details that trained security personnel had overlooked. Eleanor continued. Your mother trusted very few people. She trusted me. She trusted you. And eventually, she trusted the archive. She opened a small wooden cabinet and removed a sealed envelope. She gave me this 20 years ago. Adrian stared at it. His mother's handwriting appeared across the front. His name was written beneath it. He reached for the envelope, but stopped. Why did you wait? Eleanor's eyes softened. Because she asked me to. She told me that if you ever found the archive, I should give you this only after you had seen the evidence for yourself. Adrian opened it carefully. Inside was a single page. His mother's message was brief. She wrote that she had begun to suspect someone was altering family records and using her illness as cover. She did not know how far the deception reached. She feared that if she confronted the wrong person too soon, Adrian would become part of the dispute before he was prepared. Then came the sentence that made him lower the page. If you are reading this, then the door opened, and the truth has finally found you. Adrian closed his eyes. For a moment, the powerful man who controlled Blackwood Estate looked less like a mafia boss and more like the son who had spent 20 years believing he understood why his mother had disappeared. Olivia watched him quietly. Eleanor reached for another folder. There is more. She placed it on the table. Inside were copies of correspondence between Victor and the former family attorney. The letters showed repeated discussions about extending Victor's authority over the trust. But one final page was missing. Eleanor said the original had been stored at the country house. Adrian looked at Olivia. They both understood. The second property was not the end of the trail. It was the place where the final proof had been hidden. Adrian stood and gathered the documents. His voice was calm again, but the certainty behind it had changed. We go back tonight. Eleanor shook her head gently. Before you do, remember this. Your mother did not want you to become like the people who deceived her. She wanted you to learn the truth without losing yourself. Adrian looked down at the letter. Olivia saw something soften in his expression. Then, that is what I will do. As they left Eleanor's home, she watched from the doorway. The rain had stopped, and a pale evening light stretched across the street. Adrian walked toward the car, then paused beside Olivia. You could have ignored that door, he said. Olivia looked at him. I could not. Adrian gave a small nod. He had spent his life believing power meant controlling every room he entered. Now he was learning something harder. Sometimes power meant having the humility to listen when someone others overlooked saw what you could not. And somewhere inside the country house, the missing page was still waiting. The missing page was waiting exactly where Eleanor had said it would be, but finding it required Adrian and Olivia to look at the country house differently. They returned just after sunset, carrying Eleanor's documents in a leather folder and the old brass key from Blackwood Estate. The house was quiet beneath the fading light, its tall windows reflecting the darkening sky. Adrian entered first, then stopped near the hallway portrait of his mother. He remembered what Eleanor had said. His mother had not wanted him to lose himself in the pursuit of truth. So Adrian resisted the instinct to search quickly. Instead, he studied the room. Olivia walked slowly behind him, observing the details that most people would ignore. Your mother trusted patterns, she said. Adrian looked at her. What do you see? Olivia pointed toward the wooden cabinet beneath the portrait. The dust is different around that drawer. Adrian opened it. Inside was nothing except an old cloth and a small brass plate. Olivia examined the plate and noticed a number engraved beneath it. 12. The same number from the key found in the hidden archive. Adrian inserted the key into a narrow compartment hidden behind the cabinet's back panel. A soft click followed. The panel opened, revealing a slim space containing several sealed envelopes and a leather-bound ledger. Adrian carefully removed the ledger. The first pages contained dates and property transfers. The entries matched the trust documents they had already found. Then, near the middle, they discovered a series of handwritten notes from his mother. She had recorded every unusual extension of Victor's authority, every missing document, and every meeting she believed required further investigation. One entry carried a date from 20 years earlier. Beside it, she had written, "Victor believes the original records are gone." Adrian looked at Olivia. They were never gone. Olivia shook her head. "Your mother moved them." Adrian turned another page. A final entry named a storage room beneath the old library. They moved through the house until they reached a narrow staircase hidden behind a bookcase. At the bottom was a small room filled with empty shelves. Most of the cabinets were open, but one remained locked. Adrian used the brass key. Inside was a sealed envelope containing the missing page. He unfolded it carefully. The document was the original trust agreement, complete with his mother's verified signature and the official expiration date of Victor's authority. It proved that the repeated extensions had not been authorized by her. But there was another detail. The document also contained a handwritten statement from the former family attorney confirming that he had been instructed by Victor to prepare the extensions. Adrian read the page in silence. Olivia stood beside him. The evidence was finally complete. Victor had not simply misunderstood the trust. He had knowingly continued an arrangement that should have ended years earlier. Adrian closed the folder. "Now we know." Olivia looked at him. Knowing is not the same as proving it publicly. Adrian nodded. He understood. The documents needed independent verification before he confronted anyone. He called a trusted attorney outside the family organization and arranged for the records to be reviewed. Then he returned to the main room and placed his mother's letter beside the photograph. For a moment, he simply looked at her face. 20 years of uncertainty had been reduced to a handful of pages, but the emotional weight remained. Olivia stood near the doorway, giving him space. Adrian finally turned toward her. "You were right about the dust." She smiled faintly. "It was a small detail." "Small details change everything," Adrian replied. Before they left, Adrian noticed another envelope beneath the ledger. It had not been mentioned by Eleanor. His mother's handwriting appeared on the front. This time, only 4 words were written there. "For Adrian, when ready." He opened it. The message inside was shorter than the others. "Do not punish people because they lied to you. Protect what is true. Restore what was taken, and leave the door open for those who were afraid to speak." Adrian lowered the page. Olivia watched him carefully. The man who had entered the house expecting to find evidence against Victor now understood that his mother's final request was not about revenge. It was about what he would choose to do with the truth. Adrian folded the letter and placed it safely inside the folder. Then he looked toward Olivia. "Tomorrow, we finish this." For the first time since the hidden door had opened, Adrian no longer felt like he was chasing the past. He was finally ready to face the present. The next morning, Adrian returned to Blackwood Estate with the verified documents secured in a leather folder and his mother's final letter close to his heart. Olivia walked beside him through the quiet entrance hall, carrying the original records that had remained hidden for 20 years. Neither needed to say what was coming. Victor Hale was waiting in the private study. He stood near the window with his usual composed expression, but when Adrian entered with Olivia, his eyes immediately moved toward the folder in Adrian's hand. "We need to talk," Adrian said. Victor nodded. "About the basement?" "About everything." Adrian placed the original trust agreement on the desk. Victor looked at it without touching the page. The room became completely still. Adrian laid out the verified signature, the expiration date, the former attorney's statement, and the records documenting every extension of Victor's authority. One document at a time, the story that had protected Victor for 2 decades began to disappear. Victor finally spoke. "Your mother was unwell. She needed someone to manage the estate." Adrian looked directly at him. "For 6 months. Not 20 years. Victor lowered his eyes. He did not deny the dates. He did not challenge the signatures. Instead, he admitted that the temporary arrangement had continued because no one had questioned it. Adrian remained silent for a moment. He remembered his mother's letter. "Protect what is true. Restore what was taken. Leave the door open for those who were afraid to speak." "Why did you hide the original records?" Adrian asked. Victor looked toward the old photograph on the desk. "Because I believed the family would collapse if the truth came out," Olivia quietly answered. "Or because you were afraid of losing control." Victor looked at her. For the first time, he seemed to recognize that the woman standing beside Adrian was not merely a maid who happened to discover a locked door. She had followed every detail with patience and had helped uncover the truth without seeking power for herself. Adrian turned toward his attorney, who had arrived with independent verification of the documents. The records would now be transferred to the proper legal process, and the family trust would be reviewed by an outside professional. No shouting was necessary. No threat was necessary. The documents spoke clearly enough. Victor's authority would end, and the assets affected by the unauthorized extensions would be restored through the appropriate legal channels. Adrian then looked at Olivia. "You found the door." She nodded. "You noticed the photograph." Another nod. "You questioned the dust, the key, the documents, and the dates." Olivia gave a small smile. Someone had to notice. Adrian looked down at his mother's letter. For years, he had believed that power meant knowing every answer before anyone else could ask the question. Now he understood something his mother had tried to leave for him. Real strength was not refusing to listen. It was having enough humility to recognize the person who saw what you could not. Later that afternoon, Adrian returned to the basement with Olivia. The heavy wooden door stood open. Sunlight from the hallway reached across the old floor and illuminated the shelves that had once been hidden in darkness. Adrian placed the family photograph inside a new frame and set it on the central desk. Then he opened the remaining cabinets and ordered the records properly preserved and cataloged. Nothing would be hidden again. Olivia stood near the doorway, watching quietly. Adrian turned toward her. "You should have been heard long before this." She looked at him and simply said, "I am glad the door opened." Adrian smiled faintly. The mansion no longer felt like a place filled with locked rooms. It felt like a place finally allowed to breathe. As they walked back toward the main hall, the open doorway remained behind them, filled with warm afternoon light. And that day, Adrian finally understood that the person everyone had overlooked had been the one who showed him where the truth was waiting. The door had been locked for 20 years, but dignity had never been locked away.